Lucía Giménez still suffers pain in her knees from the years she spent scrubbing floors in the men's bathroom at the Opus Dei residence in Argentina's capital for hours without payGiménez, now 56, joined the conservative Catholic group in her native Paraguay at the age of 14 with the promise she would get an education. But instead of math or history, she was trained in cooking, cleaning, and other household chores to serve in Opus Dei residences and retirement homes. For 18 years she washed clothes, scrubbed bathrooms and attended to the group's needs for 12 hours a day, with breaks only for meals and praying. Despite her hard labor, she says, "I never saw money in my hands." Giménez and 41 other women have filed a complaint against Opus Dei to the Vatican for alleged labor exploitation, as well as abuse of power and of conscience. The Argentine and Paraguayan citizens worked for the movement in Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Uruguay, Italy and Kazakhstan between 1974 and 2015.
Opus Dei, Work of God in Latin, was founded by the Spanish priest José María Escriva in 1928, and has 90,000 members in 70 countries. The lay group, which was greatly favoured by St. John Paul II, who canonised Escriva in 2002, has a unique status in the Church and reports directly to the Pope. Most members are laymen and women with secular jobs and families who strive to sanctify ordinary life. Other members are priests or celibate lay people. The complaint alleges the women, often minors at the time, labored under manifestly illegal conditions that included working without pay for 12 hours plus without breaks except for food or prayer, no registration in the social security system and other violations of basic rights. The women are demanding financial reparations from Opus Dei and that it acknowledges the abuses and apologises to them, as well as the punishment of those responsible. "I was sick of the pain in my knees, of getting down on my knees to do the showers," Giménez told the Associated Press. "They don't give you time to think, to criticize and say that you don't like it. You have to endure because you have to surrender totally to God." The women in the complaint have one thing in common: humble origins. They were recruited and separated from their families between the ages of 12 and 16. In some cases, like Giménez, they were taken to Opus Dei centers in another country, circumventing immigration controls. They claim that Opus Dei priests and other members exercised coercion of conscience on the women to pressure them to serve and to frighten them with spiritual evils if they didn't comply with the supposed will of God. They also controlled their relations with the outside world. Most of the women asked to leave as the physical and psychological demands became intolerable. But when they finally did, they were left without money. Many also said they needed psychological treatment after leaving Opus Dei. "The hierarchy is aware of these practices," said Sebastian Sal, the women's lawyer. "It is an internal policy of the Opus Dei. The search for these women is conducted the same way throughout the world. It is something institutional." The women's complaint, filed in September with the Vatican Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, also points to dozens of priests affiliated with Opus Dei for their alleged intervention, participation and knowledge in the denounced events. The allegations in the complaint are similar to those made by members of another conservative Catholic organisation also favoured by St. John Paul II, the Legion of Christ. The Legion recruited young women to become consecrated members of its lay branch, Regnum Christi, to work in Legion-run schools and other projects. Those women alleged spiritual and psychological abuse, of being separated from family and being told their discomfort was God's will and that abandoning their vocation would be tantamount to abandoning God. Pope Francis has been cracking down on 20th-century religious movements after several religious orders and lay groups were accused of sexual and other abuses by their leaders. Opus Dei has so far avoided much of the recent controversy, though there have been cases of individual priests accused of misconduct. If there is a traumatic experience or one that has left them with a wound, we want to honestly listen to them, understand what happened and from there correct what has to be corrected, she said. She added that all the people currently working on site are paid, adding that some 80 women currently work for Opus Dei in Argentina. However, she said, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, society as a whole dealt with these issues in a more informal or family way. Opus Dei has made the necessary changes and modifications to accompany the law in force today. Beatriz Delgado, who worked for Opus Dei for 23 years in Argentina and Uruguay, said she was told that I had to give my salary to the director and that everyone gave it. It was part of giving to God. They convince you with a vocation, with God calls you, God asks this of you, you cannot fail God. They hooked me with that, she said. So far, the Vatican has not ruled on the complaint and it's not clear if it will. A Vatican spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for information. If there is no response, the women's legal representatives say they will initiate criminal proceedings for human trafficking, reduction to servitude, awareness control and illegitimate deprivation of liberty against Opus Dei in Argentina and other countries the women worked in. Argentine law sanctions human trafficking with prison sentences of 4 to 15 years. The statute of limitations is 12 years after the alleged crime ceases.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe